Good morning, everyone, and excuse me. Sorry, my voice is apparently cracking this early Monday morning, but it is a brand new week here on FPC Radio Live, and we are just a few more days closer to the NFL draft, and we're just flying through the month of April. Baseball is in full swing, pun intended. And, of course, like I said, the NFL constantly dominates the headlines, so we got a lot to talk about today. First and foremost, though, unfortunately, we all learned about the just real tragic story of Dwayne Haskins passing away. Obviously, he was hit by a car down in South Florida, and sadly, at 24 years old, is no longer with us. And the news really put into focus kind of I guess the imbalance when it comes to how we look at players and just real life. Like I think so many people, professionals included, and obviously one person in particular, Adam Schefter, took really a well-deserved beating over the last couple of days based on his choice words. And it's not just, look, I kind of fall in between. I saw some people, asking for him to be, basically you're drawn and quartered out in, the public square, and others saying, oh, it's just a mistake. I'm kind of in between because do I think this is a fireable offense? No, not necessarily, but I think he deserves a lot of criticism based on his history and some of the ways he's handled some things in the past. And look, I'm sure he's reached out personally to people and apologized. I think Ryan Clark had mentioned that he had done that. Obviously not in front of camera. So unless it's in front of camera in the public eye, it doesn't matter. But the point is, hopefully this situation will allow him to kind of look inward and maybe, in the future, realize that, look, I mean, at the end of the day, these are human beings. And, when a young man dies at 24, tragically, there's just there's no time, there's no reasonable situation in which you need to discuss his playing career. There's, you know what I mean? There's no appropriate reason to do that. And, I think unfortunately too many people have just become desensitized, and obviously looking for the opportunity to break news or have a reaction. You don't have to have a reaction to everything. Sometimes you just put the news out, or again, you have to figure this out. And like I said, he has a history. I mean, let's not go. Let's not too long ago, he and ESPN, I believe, had to settle with Jason Pierre-Paul because he leaked very personal, private medical. This is when everyone, for the first time in the world, heard about HIPAA. Now everyone feels like everything is connected to that, but that's besides the point. That's a whole different discussion for another day and maybe another show. But the point is, he's had instances in the past where he's kind of crossed that line from reporter doing his job to now you're just what I mean, you're ignoring the human element to it. So he took a well-deserved I guess batch of criticism over the weekend. But the big point being is, like, unfortunately we lost a kid who by all accounts was well liked. We saw a lot of emotional reaction from a lot of players, teammates, coaches, and that also puts things into perspective because before the other day you say Dwayne Haskins, a lot of people just think of him as a backup quarterback, and that's how guys like Schefter reacted, and that's the bad part. That's how you look at it, and from our perspective, we say, oh, it was just a backup quarterback. Well, no, I mean, based on the reaction, and you see this from number of different players. I mean, he was well liked, he was well loved, he was a care. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of things that have really been put into focus over the last couple of days that hopefully in the future, when unfortunate situations like this are covered, we don't have these just insensitive and just really just inappropriate tweets. And it doesn't mean that Adam Schefter was being malicious. It just means he made a really stupid decision to tweet what he tweeted. And unfortunately that was part of the discussion this weekend, when it really should have been about the tragic loss of a 24-year-old life. So
Yeah, I mean, the tweet should have simply been Dwayne Haskins, quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers, tragically died today when
yeah,
he was hit by a vehicle on route whatever in South Florida. That's it.
yeah,
You didn't need to go into he was trying to catch on and where he was drafted. Those are things that you can talk about later. I mean, Dwayne Haskins is someone's husband, someone's son,
hmm
someone's friend, someone's teammate. And if that's how they're finding out how this happened, that message is kind of like, well, wait a second, we just lost a loved one and we're now talking about whether he's going to catch on with Pittsburgh and it didn't work out in Washington and yada yada yada. And Adam Schefter should be better than that. The amazing thing I found out over this weekend is Adam Schefter makes $9 million a year,
yeah, oh yeah,
which I like. That just blows my mind. I mean, Stephen A. Smith, I think, is the highest paid person on ESPN, although now it's going to be Troy Aikman and Joe Buck. But Stephen A. Smith makes about $12 million a year. At least he provides a lot of content, right? He's on like every show.
hmm
Same thing with Mike Greenberg. I mean, Schefter occasionally writes for the website, based off of his tweets. But that's a pretty good gig, $9 million a year to essentially be on your phone 24 hours a day.
yeah,
But you kind of do that too, so
yeah. I was gonna,
God
what,
bless him.
John? You make a great point. I do
I
that
do.
too.
Mhm.
Okay, maybe I'm not worth $9 million a year. I'll take 7. I'm good
Well,
with 7. Seven's a good
yeah.
number. No, I mean, obviously the way the dynamic works now, it's like it's not so much regional sourcing, it's national. So these
Right.
teams, who they're going to go to? Well, they're going to go to Schefter. They're going to go to Ian Rappaport, Jay Glazer. The national newsbreakers, and that's what ESPN pays for. I mean, Adam Schefter doesn't have to write squat. I mean, I wouldn't even be surprised if he had like a ghostwriter. You know what I mean? Like just
Sure.
someone to kind of
Yep.
throw together some of his thoughts because he's on his phone. He gets people. The information's fed to him. Like I'm not saying that he goes out. He doesn't go out and like he hasn't built up his credibility and his sources and stuff like that. But at this point, he's kind of on easy street. And I'm not saying easy as
Hmm.
in his job's easy. It's just that, now the sources come to him. And,
Sure.
that's just how the whole dynamic works. And you can speak to this, and I'm sure others, have spoke. Actually, they spoke about this on the eye test our last episode. But, prior to this, it was, the local guys, might have
Hmm.
a more of a relationship with that. So maybe they break those news pertaining to whatever team. But now it's not necessarily the case. So and that's where you can kind of see where he becomes a bit robotic because it's just it's just a system. It's just a formula. It's like, okay, news breaks, news information, tweet,
Hmm.
and next thing you have a tweet. Say Russell Wilson passed away, and it's like, oh, Russell Wilson, quarterback of the Seahawks and Broncos, the guy who threw an interception on the goal line pass. It's like, wait a
Right.
minute, what? Like
Yeah.
that's kind of where you're at right now with the stuff that he sent out. But look, the bottom line is, I just don't. I just it's unfortunate that at the end of the day, we a human life was lost, and it's
Hmm.
unfortunate that it happened at such an early age, a young age, and you know and
The
hopefully go ahead.
we kind of went through this with Kobe Bryant 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Remember? I mean, obviously the tragic helicopter accident. I remember that was one of the most bizarre moments I can remember in the last I don't know how many years. I was out shopping that day, and next thing you know, I'm getting texts from friends, and I'm like, this can't be true. This
Yeah.
possibly cannot be true. This has got to be some sort of hoax. And then it just happened. And of course, within hours, there's pieces out there. Well, he uh, the rape allegations and this and that and everything else. I'm like, let the man at least rest. Let his family rest for a moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that's the thing. You don't have to have a take on everything,
Hmm.
and that's I mean that applies in so many ways, John, to the NFL. And actually, it's kind of a nice segue into what we're going to talk about next because um, there's this. I'm starting. At a certain point, John, I believed the phrase "where there's smoke, there's fire." Like there's some truth to that. Where it's like, okay, you hear enough, and eventually, it's like, okay, there's got to be some truth to that. I'm starting to move off that principle because, to be honest with you, I don't believe that anymore as much as I used to because I do believe that people just talk out their rear end because there's really no repercussions that come from it. I mean, how often like, and for example, and the reason I bring this up is this whole snowflake Brady Roger Predactor Miami Dolphins thing. Okay, it's just to me it just there's a lot of it that just doesn't add up in terms of how this would actually come to fruition. Like, you can have an idea, John. Like, if you're Mike Florio or Pro Football Talk or Ben Volen, whoever is sourcing this story, you can have this idea that you know maybe it's just simmering on the surface, and maybe it's got a little juice to it, but you can have this idea and get creative with it, because here's the thing: you can claim sources, you can claim this. I mean, you can change. It's all about semantics, Sean. You can change wording, maybe just one word, maybe just a couple, to basically absolve yourself from any sort of repercussions for being wrong. And that's exactly what's happening here. So you have this massive story that to me feels, based on the people that are reporting it, I don't have a lot of faith in what the actual facts are, but it's a lose-lose situation across the board. Because what happens, John, if Tom Brady comes out and denies this, what is the response going to be? Well, of
Well, that
course.
he's lying.
Of course he's
yes.
going to say that. Well, okay.
Right.
If he doesn't say anything, like he really has just kind of ignored this, and this is kind of excuse me, this is kind of what he does. He doesn't really care too much about stuff like this. I know Bruce Arians can't stop talking, so he's commented on this. Um, eh, eh, he's in a lose-lose situation. So if he doesn't comment, he's guilty. If he comments, well, of course he's going to say that. So of course he's
Right.
guilty. There's no winning in all this, and this is exactly what Mike Florio knows, and guys like this, because again, when it's all said and done, the idea sounds juicy, right? It sounds like a great drama movie, but how does it happen? How does First of all this hinges on the fact that Tampa would have to allow him to do this, and by all accounts, why would they? Like, if I was
the playing part. Yes, I mean the ownership. He could just
well, yeah, but no, of
retired,
course,
and then,
and at that point, it's like, who the hell cares if he's retired? I mean, if he wants to own the Dolphins, by all means, but
right.
like, clearly he wanted to play, or he or in my opinion, he just reconsidered. I mean, he maybe rushed his retirement decision, and for whatever reason, that's his that's his thing. But to me, it would never add up. Like, I don't think he's a relatively smart guy. I think he's smart in certain areas that we've talked about it. Like, he realizes he understands what his strengths are. Let's put it that way. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like he said before, I don't know if he'd make it as an accountant, but he knows his environment, he knows his situation, and I think he's smart enough to realize that even if this were true, all this stuff, he would have to, again, somehow convince the Buccaneers, who I don't think in any situation would ever do that, because, well, they don't need to. And I think they would
Mm-hmm.
have happily eaten whatever money he would have taken up on the cap this year to not allow him to do that, if that was the case. So, when it all comes down I mean, all these theories, all these ideas, and all these secret meetings that are, again, it would be akin to the most like unbelievable NFL story in the history of the NFL. Let's put it that way. If this were
Yeah.
true, this would be the most incredible story in the history of the NFL. So I just don't believe it. Sorry.
Well, there's a lot involved there, right? First of
Yeah.
all, how does Sean Payton go from New Orleans to Miami? Because
Exactly.
New Orleans still owns his rights too, so there would have to be some sort of trade there. The greatest quarterback ever decides to retire and then become part owner of the Miami Dolphins. I mean, that can happen. I can get that. I mean, I think Peyton Manning at some point is going to own a team,
Oh,
or
sure.
part owner of a team, because these guys, as rich as they are, they look like peasants compared to the people that are buying teams. I mean, Denver's going to go for close to $5 billion, and Denver's a good solid franchise. I mean, it's probably a top 15 franchise. But what about the franchises that are above them? What are they going to go? I mean, if Bob Kraft ever put the Patriots up for bid, it would get 7-8 million. Let alone the Cowboys would be double any other team in the NFL, because they bring in so much money. But yeah, it just seems like it'd be like trying to draw an inside straight flush.
Mhm.
Okay, retire. Okay, Tampa has no problem with me becoming the quarterback in Miami, which I don't think Tampa's going to go along with. And then, oh, by the way, they're going to have to get involved in the ownership. what percentage, and can you play quarterback while you own the team? Like, I don't know if that's true. You can't do that in the NBA. I mean, I know LeBron's going to, at some point, be part owner of an NBA team. You can't play and be an owner in the NBA. I don't know what the case is in the NFL, but that does seem like a bit of a problem.
I mean, I'm sure it might have happened maybe, back in the early days of the NFL. You know what I mean? Like I would
the
have
1936.
Yeah, where
Bears
they were playing games and then smoking cartons of cigarettes and then going out for drinks after game.
Yeah.
Back in the day, back in the good old days, John. Yeah, like I mean,
we'd have to reach out to Upton Bell to find out if Upton would know that story because he lived it.
Yeah, exactly. We'll ask him about that. No, but yeah, exactly. I'm with you here, John. It's just there's so many things. Like I love that analogy. You're basically you have two cards to a straight flush, and you get one of them on the flop. Okay, so you're basically trying to draw the turn in the river to get that straight flush. That's what we're talking about here when it comes to an idea. Yeah. Oh yeah. Every time I sit down to play cards, this idea in my head is I'm going to get a straight flush every single time. Right. Well, it's a great idea, John, but it's not that too easy to happen. And there's a lot of things that have to go on. And again, I 100% believe that under no circumstance would Tampa allow this to happen.
No.
And right there, boom, this entire ordeal is dead. Because, then you're talking about Brady having, I'm sure there's some way that he would have to sacrifice this season, and that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. So, right. To me, I feel like this is just a whole lot of fan fiction. I mean, really, I have no other way to describe this other than, maybe, and this part could be true, John. Maybe he does want to play for the Dolphins when he's a free agent. Well, in which case, that's fine. That's not a story.
Sure.
I mean, it could be when after this season and he actually does become a free agent, and you can actually, maybe make those conclusions that that's where he's going to go. But that's not a story. But if you juice it up a little bit, well, guess what? Now you got yourself a bombshell. But unfortunately, to me, it's just very transparent. It's very, it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up, and that's why I started this conversation off by saying I don't think I no longer subscribe to where there's smoke, there's fire. Because in my eyes, the way I see it is all these guys, Florio, Chris Sims, Ben Volen, I feel like their sources are just talking amongst themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's not a source. That's just, again, a groupthink fan fiction.
We were fortunate here because we had the best NFL insider for decades in Will McDonough of the Boston Globe.
Yeah, oh yeah.
And, he was in a league of his own. I mean, you'd hear other writers tell stories because back then, of course, in the 70s, 80s, they would sit around the office and phone calls would come in. There were no cell phones, and it'd be like, "Hey, Will, Al Davis is on line 1. Hey, Will, Red Auerbach is on line 2." And I would see Will McDonough and Red Auerbach playing racquetball after a Celtics practice. He was close to all these guys, and he knew how to handle all that. Now it just seems like you're getting one source and you're running with it, and if you're wrong, so be it.
You delete the tweet. You just delete it,
right?
And it's gone.
Yeah, this isn't exactly Woodward and Bernstein, where you need two sources and you have to back it up, and if you don't,
you don't even need a good source. I mean, and that's the thing, and that's one of the issues that we're kind of navigating in real time now here in the sports. I mean, it's not just sports, but we're talking about it because that's what we talk about. But it's the same across all politics, sports, whatever. But in the case, that's what it is. It's like you don't have to have a sort. Like I can masquerade as a insider by making educated guesses. And if I hit just a few of them, that's all I need. I mean, you still got people out there that believe what Mo Chanel or whatever the hell his name is. And it's like, that guy has just made things up at every single turn. But, eventually, if you make some logical assumption, I mean, there's certain things that you can say, oh, you can see the writing on the wall. Sources say so-and-so and this team agree to a contract. Well, yeah, I mean, it's been kind of, leaning towards that for weeks. If you take an educated guess, there's a decent percentage that chance that you're going to get it right. And that's what people do. And if you're wrong, well, you either delete the tweet or no one really gives a bleep, and that,
there you go.
and that applies, and that applies to, that applies to even like the mainstream guys. It's like, um you have guys out there that will just literally say anything. But like I said before, and we started this conversation, it's like you can change a couple words. That's all it matters. Change a couple words, and all of a sudden you can just, if it's wrong, you're like, hey, I didn't report it. I just relayed information or whatever. You know what I mean? There's certain
Mhm.
there's certain things that you can do.
Might be leading you in a direction at this point.
Thank you, John. Thank you. I appreciate that. That was obviously very much in real time. Gonna get a lot.
Well,
of
the
this.
thing is too, Ian, that makes this difficult is, and again, I'm going to bring back Will McDonough, who passed away 20 years ago. And actually, when I was very young, breaking into this, he was very helpful to me. He's a very nice guy. Would reach out to me, say, hey, if you need anything, let me know. He was a peach.
Mhm.
I saw him knock out Ray Claiborne in the locker room back in 1979, and I don't think anybody wanted to fool around with Will. And then Ray Claiborne actually became a much more accommodating guy and was one of the best interviews on the team. I'm going back in the late 70s, early 80s. But what Will McDonough would do is there was no Twitter back then, so it was all in print.
Mhm.
So he had time to get the information, digest it, make sure that it was accurate, got a second source, and then went to print so that people would reach out and get the newspaper the next day. That's changed. Everything's on Twitter, everything's online. All I can remember is that we're coming up on the 9th anniversary of the marathon bombing back in 2013. I was down there that day. I remember getting on a bus, which wasn't the brightest thing to do, but I, wanted to get the hell out of there. And within 10 minutes of the bombings, the New York Post put out on Twitter that 20 people were dead and that Saudi nationals had already been captured. Neither one of those things true. And
Yeah.
that's supposed to be a somewhat reputable newspaper. I mean, you can debate whether it is or not, but that's where we're at now because you have to be first, even if you're wrong. And
Yeah,
the same thing with Adam Schefter. If Jay
exactly.
Glazer beats him to the punch, then ESPN's going to say, hey, Adam, we're paying you $9 million a year. Why did you get, beat on the story by Jay Glazer or whoever else?
Well, and again, and it plays right into it. Like ESPN's probably rather he get something wrong occasionally than to not
Yes.
get it at all. Because at the end of the
Yep.
day, we're gonna complain about this. We're gonna talk about his actions, everything like that. But people are gonna forget about it. Like, I mean, people like there was a tweet making the rounds the other day talking about kind of his missteps. And like I said, his biggest one, the JPP one, in which ESPN actually got sued and had to
Mhm.
pay, wasn't even mentioned. So exactly,
Right.
to that, it's like, okay, give it some time. People will forget about it, or it'll just be kind of like oft mentioned, but no one, you know what I mean? No one's going to care because again, at the end of the day, the being right isn't important. It's
Mhm.
being first. And that's just unfortunately the environment that we are now in. So, all right, John.
Old,
Oh,
old, old topic in politics. Wrong and strong is better than right and weak. If you get up
exactly.
on a podium or at a campaign and you seem believable, even if you're making no sense or not having any facts right, but it appears that you're
Hmm.
confident in yourself, people will buy into it rather than the guy who gets up on stage and is kind of hemming and hawing and wishy-washy. And people will say, well, I just don't really buy into this, although the guy's measured, smart, and knows what he's
Hmm.
talking about. That's where we're at right now with all of these things.
No, and it makes it a little bit more difficult to kind of sift through all the BS, but that's what we do here on FPC Radio Live, and that's what
Yes.
we're going to continue to do.
You
So
may have convinced me a little bit this morning, Ian.
I know, John. I know. I have convinced the masses, and I will continue to do so. We'll be back on Wednesday. Folks, have a great Monday. We will certainly be talking more probably about this and whatever happens in the NFL. Go over to fullpresscoverage.com. We're going to be having another mock draft, our fifth one. And if history has proven anything, there's going to be a massive trade roughly 30 minutes after we publish this that will alter the draft order once again, because I think our last three mock drafts have been, immediately made, just completely useless 30 to 45 minutes after we publish them. So hopefully last week it was the Eagles trade. Hopefully this week we don't get much and we can actually push that mock draft. But check it out. It's going to be publishing this morning. And of course, go over to fullpresshockey.com where we're gearing up for quite a bit of playoff content. So have a great day, folks, and we'll talk to you later.